A warm welcome to you all here to the President's 1783 networking event with Accenture Strategy. I'm delighted that we have a stellar lineup for you this afternoon, including Peter Lacy, who'll be speaking shortly. And also we've got some colleagues from Dell and Patagonia as well. First, I see some familiar faces on Zoom. Those you will know I am president of Glasgow Chamber of Commerce, in fact, the 133rd president of the Chamber of Commerce. Some of you know me from my day job as City Glasgow College Principal and Chief Executive. For those of you who are joining us here today, we just got some housekeeping events to take care of first, and then I'll give you a discussion on the format and a wee bit of context, and then I'll hand it over to Peter. So housekeeping, many of you will be on Zoom and well practiced in the Zoomiverse at this sphere. But first of all, you need to know that we're recording this event for those who are not able to join us for this pioneering event. So just be aware of that today. And also, there should be plenty of opportunity for you to ask the questions that you've been burning to ask our various speakers today. So please use the chat function and write your question out. And I will then, as moderator, go into that chat function and try and pick up those questions and put it to particularly the panel later on. And obviously, this is a chamber event, so we like to have good timing. So we'll finish this event at 5:30 UK time. Format, Peter will speak first, and I'll introduce him shortly. Then we've got a panel session and then a moderated Q&A session. But I think it'd be important that to give you a bit of context for this event, Glasgow Chamber of Commerce has been working very assiduously under the leadership of our Chief Executive, Stuart Patrick, and one of our Senior Directors, Alison McRae, for the last 3 to 5 years in partnership with Zero Waste Scotland and Glasgow City Council, and indeed the Circular Economy in Netherlands, to position Glasgow as the leading circular city. It's very intensive work, and today we want to take that stage forward. We want to go beyond our work with SMEs and the work that we've done in these last few years to raise general awareness, and we were recognized for this, in fact, with the Circular Awards and by a case study that we did with the C40s and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. We want to go beyond all of that today to be even more ambitious, and along that journey we've been assisted by Zero Waste Scotland and the City Council, and now we're going corporate. And today, we're delighted to have some of the foremost leaders in the circular economy and circularity to take us forward. And perhaps amongst those speakers are, Peter, I'll introduce him, but also Louise Koch, who's the Corporate Sustainability Director International Region from Dell. And we have another major corporate, global corporate, Ryan Gellert, General Manager, EMA, Region Patagonia. Both those two companies, global brands, have actually been able to optimize for their customers the benefits of the circular economy. We're also joined by Peter's colleague, Wesley Spindler, who's the Business Strategy and Sustainability Senior Manager for Accenture Strategy. So, Peter, you have a very distinguished background. I was just checking your CV before today. Senior Managing Director for Europe, Accenture Strategy. You are a very busy executive, but you're an alumnus of INSEAD, Harvard, Yale, Cambridge, and Nottingham. And in that wisdom that you've gained, you've managed to help the leaders of many of the Fortune 500 companies, the UN, the UK, and indeed European governments. And you're also the author of the Circular Economy Handbook. So really, we're waiting with bated breath to give us some inspiration, some reflections on where you think we need to go next. Peter, over to you.
Well, thank you very much indeed. That was a very kind introduction. Thank you, all of you, for being here this afternoon for this session. And thank you to the Glasgow Chamber of Commerce for all of the leadership that you've shown in recent years. A notable winner of our global cities and regional stream of the Circulars, which is the world's largest and first awards for circular economy innovation that we set up 5 years ago with the World Economic Forum. So a pleasure to have a chance to address you, and also to have the chance to address you in what will be an important 12 to 18 months with the hosting of the COP process as well, which I would make a very strong link to in terms of circular economy. So I believe we've got some slides. Is that right? Are those up? If we haven't, it's not a massive deal, but has someone got some slides that were sent through?
We'll get those to you shortly.
Okay, great.
There you go.
Okay, so before I start going through the slides, let me start by talking about our lens on the circular economy. So the circular economy is too often confused in our view, in my view, with recovery and recycling and really the next generation of waste management. What we've tried to do is to expand the definition of circular economy to be a fundamental rethink at the macro and microeconomic level of the relationship between economic development, value creation, and the use of scarce or harmful natural resources. So the aim of what we're trying to do at the macro level is to ensure that we can grow, that we can drive wealth creation, jobs, economic development, all of the things that we want from a thriving global market and a thriving global economy, from the things we don't want, which are environmental pollution, degradation, the using up of those scarce materials. And then at the micro level for individual companies, if anything, the contribution I think we've made through the 2 books over the last few years and through client work and through work with different organizations like the WEF, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, the World Resources Institute, and indeed partners like the companies that are going to talk in a minute, like Dell, is try to focus that lens on the company level of how you decouple the value delivered to a consumer or a customer from those scarce or harmful natural resources. And what I'm going to talk to you about today is that we believe, having seen now thousands of case studies over that period of what works and what doesn't, what makes money and drives circular impact, we believe that there are some critical lessons, that the business models are at the heart of how you go about creating advantage through circular. There are some key enabling technologies that we see come up again and again, and there are some important areas and focus themes within business, like how you take consumers on the journey, how you think about investing in infrastructure, that are relevant for any business as they think about whether or not there are opportunities in a circular economy for them. So that's what I plan to cover in this particular session. And this the set of insights is based on a book that we will launch in the UK on Sunday at the Hay Festival called the Circular Economy Handbook. The digital version was out and launched at Davos. And so that is something that you can dig into in more depth in that book as well. So let's go to the first slide, if you don't mind. The burning platform. I think it's fair to say that we're in a critical state. The current global system is unsustainable and urgent action is needed. The narrative on the climate crisis is certainly, I think, at the top of mind for most stakeholders. However, only 50% of global greenhouse gases reductions can be solved through transforming the energy system alone. The other 50% will need from the way that we produce and consume resources. And that's where the circular economy comes in. The current production and consumption story is far from on track, considering macro trends. Population growth, environmental degradation, rising consumption. We expect to more than double resource use from 2015 to 2050. And our current rate of consumption is 1.7 times the Earth's carrying capacity, and headed towards 3 times the Earth's carrying capacity. So we are increasingly living off the Earth's capital, not simply using interest earned, if you use that as an environmental metaphor. In the increase in the US, we see the weight of residential waste since lockdown has in effect gone up 15 to 25%. You mentioned the point about COVID. Now, there are some downturn effects that are more positive from a waste perspective in terms of industrial and in commercial and in construction. But overall, these are going to be, if one believes that this is not a permanent trend, these are going to be issues that still need to be tackled despite COVID. And there may be important opportunities as a result of COVID, such as infrastructure spending, fiscal spending, to tap into investments to restart and reshape our economies in ways that build the platform and the foundations for a new type of relationship between resources, between the environment and our economy. So if we move to the next slide, the linear versus circular economy, slide 3. Our linear economic system means that we extract resources, we produce them, we use them, and then typically we throw them away. They go idle, or at very best, we recycle them. Waste from linear value chains hosts significant value that we're losing every day. When we think about that value lost, it's multidimensional. So when I said at the beginning that in the most cases people still believe and see circular economy as recovery and recycling, we believe that there is a 4-dimensional business case. Wasted resources are indeed still an important factor, but we also need to look at wasted embedded value, wasted capacity in production and consumption systems, and wasted life cycles. So I think what we need to look at is a very different canvas upon which to paint the full picture of circular economy. And we believe that that canvas represents $4.5 trillion in incremental opportunity to the global economy across industries, across geographies by 2030. So to restate that, a $4.5 trillion opportunity for those who can provide the products and services that help us move from a linear to a circular economy. So a circular economy system, on the other hand, seeks to close the loop on our take, make, waste value chains, or even to dematerialize value chains, reinventing the way we produce and consume in ways that still deliver the same or enhanced or superior value to end consumers in terms of the products and services that they want and need. That means waste in all forms is designed out. It means products are looped back into the system. It means materials are kept within their productive use cycles. And ultimately, we move to a regenerative and restorative system. Next slide, please. So the value at stake is important. That $4.5 trillion opportunity I mentioned to you is incredibly significant globally. And our analysis calculates that that could be worth at least 40 billion by 2030 every year in terms of upside, again, for those businesses that are able to innovate, that are able to come up with products and services, or the supply chain innovations that drive us towards circular. And also in a more transparent world that increasingly wants, needs, and is prepared to reward and punish those who can or can't deliver on that. So through embracing the circular economy, organizations can spur innovation, enter new markets, and pivot to more resilient systems, which, as I highlighted earlier, is more important than ever in current times. Now that 40 billion for the UK, I would argue, may well be even very conservative. But the economics that we've done with various different economics agencies say that this is a real prize and one that it is worth going after. Next slide, please. So let's move on to from where we are now and describing the opportunity to where do we need to be. Next slide, please. Slide 6. And this takes us to, I think, what's probably the most important section for business leaders who are joining the call today, thinking about what the opportunity is for them. Circular business models. That's the key insight from my work over the last 5 to 7, from Wesley Spindler, who's joining, and from Accenture's work as the world's leading strategy and consulting firm in this space. working with multiple clients over multiple different industries. What we keep coming back to is that those who are creating competitive advantage and circular economy input are deploying 5 business models. We have tested this again and again and again, and often they're in collaboration. So you might see 1 or 2 or 3 of these business models put together, but the fundamental business building blocks for circular economy do not change. What are those 5? Well, the first is circular inputs using renewable sources, bio-based materials, man-made materials that are recycled or highly recyclable to enable partial or total elimination of waste. An example, Nike's Flyknit, which is used in their shoes and in a number of their different garments, is a great example. 100% of the single stream upper for the shoe is made of recycled material, while there are normally 14 plus different components inside a shoe. Nike achieves 60% less waste in manufacturing through this. Then there are 3 models which cut across product life cycles. Products as a service is a business model where a company retains ownership of products and sells the benefits through a service or a subscription model. For example, Philips selling to cities the amount of light that they use and the power of light that they use, rather than selling a lamppost and selling a lamp and a bulb, and able to track that using digital technologies and sell it and slice and dice it in different ways, and to change what a city might pay up front for it, for example. The second of these cross-cutting models is product use extension. This is about extending product use through design considerations, repairs, reconditioning, upgrades, and resale for second use. Schneider Electric are a good example, particularly pioneering this space with their use extension services for switchboards, replacing components to renew or upgrade products. Extending the use of equipment can save up to 65% of the cost of new installations. And then the third of these cross-cutting models, sharing platforms. These are increasingly about driving up the utilization rate of products and assets through shared ownership, access, and usage, and removing the number of assets, resource-intensive assets, waste-intensive assets that are therefore required, but still delivering the same value. And you could argue even some of the bigger platforms that we talk about, the Airbnbs, the various transport systems that are taking place, all are working towards that end. And then finally, resource recovery. This relates to using the embedded materials or energy at the end of use of a product and recovering through collection, aggregation, and processing. Toast ale, for example, use surplus bread that would otherwise be wasted to replace virgin materials, virgin hops to brew their beer, reducing the extraction of raw materials, and also so far, only a small business here in the UK, but so far saving 42 tons of CO2. So those are some of the examples of the different business models we think are at the heart of competitive advantage for companies on the circular economy. Let's move to the next slide, because what we also found through this research, and is heavily documented in the Circular Economy Handbook, and also the circulars.org, where we've tried to make publicly available as many case studies as we can, is that there are a number of critical enablers, 5 that we believe are above and beyond any others in terms of what we see with companies creating value. The first is consumer engagement on circular, focusing on reshaping what it means to consume. Often people don't need the products actually, but rather the service or experience it provides. It's therefore crucial to educate consumers on seeing products as delivery mechanisms for a desired function, as well as on the benefits of buying circular products more broadly, because in many cases we may be changing behaviors in terms of the way they've used products and services over a long period of time. So using the marketing mix, using different incentives in order, and being very transparent in communication in order to take consumers on the journey. The second is design. It's the first crucial step towards creating circular products.
design considerations must consider how products can be kept in useful life for as long as possible, and also enable easy product recovery. Third is reverse logistics. In many of the models that we see, it's necessary to create take-back loops so that manufacturers or different players in supply chains can recover and receive idle, unwanted, damaged, underutilized, or end-of-use products, closing the loop on value chains. And as well, of course, reverse logistics is particularly important, and something I want to emphasize, that it's a key enabler of circularity, and of course, something that has experienced significant disruption during these times, where we've seen how important global logistics organizations, some of the platforms that help to enable those are. It's important that as we build back better and we build back more resilient after COVID, that we also look at other elements like the ability for those logistics networks and platforms to support and enable more circular outcomes. And then Zigzag is a company in the UK that would be an example of that, which is working with retailers to manage returns globally, working with high-profile clients such as Gap, Topshop, Selfridges, and Zigzag is basically a data analytics solution to help them return goods in the most energy efficient way that can reduce costs and waste associated with the retail industry, and actually reduces that waste and that energy loss by up to 57%. The other thing that I think is important to mention is ecosystems. This relates to engaging actors outside of your direct relationships, your supply chain, whether that's distributors, whether it's your supply chain. Big challenges often require complex solutions that can't be dealt with alone. And especially as industries and value chains blur, it's important that you end up with industries that can work through their value chain and collaborate with others. And I think my colleague from Dell is going to talk a little bit about that and some of the work that's been done in the circular electronics industry to build that kind of collaboration both within the industry but with other players. So she'll be able to illustrate that even better than I could. And then disruptive technologies. Of all the 5 enablers, we believe that disruptive technologies are the game changer. They are the thing that have made these business models possible. They are really, if you like, the reason that we're able to drive circularity in ways that we weren't in previous decades. So if we move to that slide, we found that the real story of circular is underpinned by advances in science and engineering that are breakthroughs in digital, physical, and biological. And I won't have time to go through all of the different examples here, but what we find is when we layer those 27 technologies against the most successful players, these 27 come out again and again and again. And what we now do with companies is start from the perspective of looking at these 27, looking at the business models, looking at the enablers and seeing what's possible. So things like the Internet of Things, connected devices, sensors, able to provide real-time analysis of the performance of products or services or assets, artificial intelligence and machine learning. In the physical space, robotics and the next generation of 3D printing, or in the biological fields, the next generation of biologically enhanced materials. For example, when Dell won the first Circular Economy Awards back 5 years ago, partnerships in the value chain using new generations of bioengineered packaging that were biodegradable or that were recoverable or recycled and reused again and again would be good examples. So I'll skip probably the next slide just so that we get to make sure that we've got a few minutes for questions. And if we move to the final slide, so if we go to the end, so the making the pivot slide, I think if you look at the how, what's really important as an organization is to look at how you transform the core, how you grow core business organically. So how do you integrate circular into the existing core? as well as where there may be new opportunities to invest and scale new disruptive circular businesses. So the framework that we use for circular economy is called the WISE pivot, because it recognizes that, and even more so because of COVID, we all have existing businesses, many of which are very successful. So to change the principles on which you build your business to reinvent something new is not easy. It's something that has to be done carefully and thoughtfully. So we believe this framework is a good way of preserving the best, defending what is good, while really being prepared to take smart, educated risks to benefit in the future from some of these circular economy models. So transforming the existing value chain to remove waste and increase efficiencies, growing the core business organically by embedding circular offerings to sustain the fuel for investments, and then investing in scale and entirely new disruptive circular business models. And if you move to the final slide, the very final slide, if we go to the very end, I think this is also supported by policy and investment. It's critical that you take your investors on the journey and explain what's in it for them, because it does change the economics of business in many cases. For example, balance sheets are different in a product and service business model. And in some cases, you may need some patient capital. But also, it's important that business, and that's, I think, very relevant to a conversation with the Chamber of Commerce, engages in smart ways with policymakers, because we are going to, as a result of COVID, have all sorts of fiscal spending instruments, investment in infrastructure, investment in supporting businesses, investment in R&D, and it's critical that we work from 360 degrees to tackle this problem of sustainability and circular economy, and critical that we ensure that that spending is not wasted and that somehow we build back what we had before. We need to build back circular and sustainable and in ways that deliver for the many, not the few. And that's really the purpose of the circular economy set of business models. And I hope that's giving you 2 or 3 thoughts on the business models, on the enablers, and on the critical technologies that any business of any size can look at to develop their next wave of advantage. So let me stop there.
Peter, that was excellent. That was certainly a very rapid, focused, but insightful masterclass in the circular economy. If I may ask you 2 questions, I'm conscious that you have another forum to go to, but please feel free to leave at whatever stage you can leave, but not before you answer these 2 questions. Not only was Anne-Marie O'Donnell, our chief executive, listening to that $4.8 or trillion, $4.3 trillion, $4.5 trillion opportunity. Yep. I guess the first question might be, in this new COVID world, or if there is such a thing as a post-COVID world, yep, how can we use the Circular Economy Handbook and the Circular Economy Solutions from a Glasgow point of view to actually really position us to be that leading circular city?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a great question. Thank you for it. And it's clearly the one that's on everyone's mind at the moment. I think, we frame it at Accenture. I think about it in terms of now, next, and never normal, right? And there's a certain component of this, which is just recognizing the health and humanitarian crisis and economic shock that is playing out. And a lot of that is around crisis management. There are elements which maybe could be sustainably circular, but I think everyone is very preoccupied at the moment. And I hope everybody's families and everybody on this call are navigating stormy waters with their organizations, colleagues, friends, family as well as they can. And I think so. Then if you think about the next and never normal, I think circular can be an important component for Glasgow, and other places around the world as they think about next and never normal. Next being, how do we restart the economy? We're going to be using a lot of public money to restart it. What terms and condition is that on? On what basis are we trying to build infrastructure for the longer term? What basis are we funding businesses to be more innovative and helping them to open up new opportunities for expansion, for exports, for thriving in an ever more challenging business environment? And I think circular is a good principle, and the handbook, if you like, is a good way of looking at it from the perspective of not just sustainability for sustainability's sake, but sustainability, as you imply, to go after a $4.5 trillion global opportunity of incremental sales revenue, profitability implications. And so I think these themes are not going to go anywhere, in my view. We're only scratching the surface on the macro challenges that are required, that are about a much longer time frame. And so COVID, as much as we would have wished this were not upon us, it is about how we use this crisis in smart ways, investing in the right incubators, investing in the right infrastructure, investing in the clarity of positioning on what Build Back Better means, both within the city but also beyond the city, with the partners that are going to be important in enabling that success, whether that's customers or whether or not that's other partners that are in city ecosystems. I think the other opportunity for me would be that, given we have the COP process and Glasgow is going to be central to that, I think it's very important that I mentioned that 50% of carbon emissions are addressable directly through the energy system, but 50% are not, and that need to be addressed through production and consumption systems, whether or not that's automotive value chains, agricultural value chains, retail value chains. And so I think that's an important message that needs to come through loud and clear when it comes to COP, that we need to have circular economy interwoven, not even in parallel, but interwoven into the future, and that opportunity is there for businesses to embrace that, and that climate and circular are by no means separate. They are absolutely intrinsically linked and are the X and Y chromosomes of sustainable development. And so that I think is another angle that I think Glasgow can play an important role in.
So Peter, that's the easy question I was going to ask you. The question I want to kind of ask you at this stage, the second question is, can you give, because there's about 120 people on this webinar listening to you right now, and to be honest, a very impressive bunch of leaders from the private sector, the public sector, the third sector, academia and beyond. And I guess they will be looking to say, Peter, I get it, I'm going to get that handbook, but guess what? Peter, in 30 seconds, what would be your call to action to those great leaders that are listening to you now? Because they can do this, they just need a call to action.
Yeah, well look, what I have found over the course of 5 years of working with leaders, with boards, with teams on this topic is that taking so I'm not going to give you a big highfalutin takeaway as to what the action call is. I think whoever's the head of the Glasgow Chamber, you guys can work with governments and with others to kind of create the enabling infrastructure environment. At the individual business leader level, right, it is very, very simple, which is take your existing strategy, your existing business model, sit down with your top team and with the key people within your organization that you feel get this, and look at those 3 things I mentioned. Those 5 circular business models, right? The 5 enablers and the 27 technologies that we've done the hard work for you, right? We have seen again and again and again over thousands of case studies that some configuration of those 3 things has, in almost every case, I'm trying to think. I've never had a case where we haven't found opportunities. We've had examples where the company has decided not to pursue them. Right? But we have never found an example of where a company has not been able to identify new opportunities for revenue growth, new market, new product, new service, better risk management profile, reduced cost in terms of the core asset, or a way of improving reputation and differentiation with a customer or with a supply chain or with an important stakeholder in the business. Right? So I think it is as simple as taking those three concepts, getting your right top team together, spending half a day thinking about what the opportunities are, picking a couple of them and going hard after them. I mean, it really is as simple as that. Every business can be a circular business.
And do you think, finally, is it a case that we will be able to do that and mitigate against the old cost pressures in the old post or the pre-COVID world, where those economic pressures drive us not to embrace such new initiatives? That we're chasing the money, you know.
I think if you think of the difference between now, next, and never normal, I think you've got to be realistic, right? That we are going to go through plenty of pain in the economy in the next 6 to 12 months, right? And I think, but this is the time to future-proof, because we know that we're going to have to go through that. And the Build Back Better, you know, is as much a case of society and the UK and Scotland and Glasgow as it is every individual company. All of the CEOs I talk to are having this conversation at the moment. They're saying, this is painful, and it's going to be more painful before it's less painful, right? We're only at the beginning of the economic damage, even if we're starting to get the health impact under control. So I'm not someone who likes to sweep those things away. This is a tough time for everyone. Now, that said, what those CEOs have been saying to me is there are all sorts of things I do not want to waste this crisis on, because some of the things like moving towards remote working and moving towards flexible working would take 5 years of change management for most organizations to go through. And it basically took us 5 days, right? Because no one had a choice. You know, now everyone lives on Teams, on Zoom, on Skype, or whatever it is. And I think that's a similar metaphor to other areas of the business. We've got to use these opportunities now. And then to your point about, does that then future-proof us, or does it help us to manage some of the pressures of the old economy? Yes, I think it absolutely does. Because in certain cases, you know, in most cases, if you're not opening up a new revenue stream because you're providing a product or a service that helps another customer, which not all businesses can do, if you're using circular in smart ways, you're reducing your input costs, so energy, water, material costs, waste costs, and you're enabling dematerialization. So, for example, we may have more flexible working and therefore less need for large offices. All of those play through to the bottom line, which is the same set of pressures, I think, that you mean in the old world. And therefore, I think there are lots of ways to be creative that don't fight that economic reality, but actually align with it and allow you to create value whilst creating circularity, I think.
Very comprehensive answer. I hope I did justice to John Peter's question there, and maybe hint a little bit at Douglas Aikenhead's planned obsolescence question. But perhaps, Peter, you'll join us certainly for the first part. We'll be here, the panel session, and you mentioned Dell a few times here. We've got Louise Koch, Corporate Sustainability Director for EMA International, and Dell, Ryan Gellert, General Manager of EMA Patagonia, and Wesley Spindler, your colleague, Senior Manager, Accenture Strategy, who are coming up next on this panel session. So, ladies and gentlemen, just to prove that I've read the chat, thanks very much for your questions so far. I'll try and include more of those questions now, particularly to our panelists, but I think it's fair that we give Louise, I don't know, 5-7 minutes. Louise, you're going to give your insights into this, and I guess, colleagues, some of you might know Louise. Certainly, Peter referred a few times to Dell, and I know, given your experience, Louise, in Europe, Middle East and Africa, you've got a huge amount of insight to share with us on this kind of global nature, particularly for Glasgow. But I also know that there's members in the public sector here today, and they'll be interested in your experience in the Confederation from the Danish enterprise, pre-Dell, if you will, where you drove the whole public affairs debate in Denmark, and indeed lobbied very hard in the ECU, particularly on an ethics perspective, and also the Commission for CSR and anti-corruption. I know you'll have identified a number of circular economies initiatives that you might want to share here, you know, including your take back scheme. But really, Louise, when you're in your hands now, if you'd maybe like to share your insights, I think you maybe have 1 or 2 slides, but it's over to you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Paul, and good afternoon, everybody, from a rainy afternoon in Copenhagen. Happy to join you all. Thank you for the invitation, and And thank you to the Chamber of Commerce in Glasgow for taking the leadership on this very important agenda. So yes, I would have some slides coming up, and I think they're just coming there. So I think Peter really set the stage here for the global perspective and the challenges and not least opportunities that lie ahead of us with the circular economy. So I'm gonna zoom into what we have been doing in Dell Technologies over the last 10 years and also give you a bit of an appetizer on what we are aiming to do over the next 10 years. There's so much more we could talk about, so I'm not going to get too much into business models and how digital transformation can innovate system-changing solutions, but I'm sure we can dive more into that in the panel discussion. So what I want to do is give you a deep dive here, or a brief overview of how we are driving circular economy within IT in Dell Technologies. And again, I cannot take credit for all of this work. It has been a long journey and driven by many people across the organization. But if we go to the first slide, so circular economy is obviously about its reusing, reducing, recycling, and rethinking, as Peter just said. So overall, we have three kind of straightforward ways here that we are advancing circular economy. So it's in terms of how we design our equipment, from computers to servers to storage, with the whole life cycle in mind, and we'll get into that a little bit more. It's about using sustainable, recycled, renewable materials in our products, and we have since 2013 used more than 45 million kilograms of sustainable, even compostable materials in products and packaging. And then it's at the end of life in terms of take-back programs, where we have programs around the world, and so far taking back 900 million kilograms and still counting, of course. So those would be some of the big areas. And then, of course, we can talk about the as-a-service business models as well and how we're innovating that. But diving into these three pillars. So on the next slide, this is a little bit about our design approach, designing with the life cycle in mind, and designing so that no computer or no server or no part of that should go to waste. And this life cycle design has been a part of our approach for a number of years also. First and foremost, with a modular approach, so that the products can be repaired, they can easier be recycled as well, using more screws and click mechanisms instead of adhesives, for example, clear labeling on product parts, so it's easier to recycle or reuse the materials, restrictions on coatings on surfaces, for example, which is often a challenge in terms of recycling. So a lot of ways here to enable repair, remanufacturing, reselling, recycling, and therefore extension of the life cycle and the use of the equipment and the materials. So on the next slide, please, a deep dive into or an overview of some of the circular material innovations we have been driving through the years, and that journey started back in 2009 with, or 2007 even, where we started using post-consumer recycled plastics in our desktops and in our monitors. So that's been a long way. We also used a lot of CD cases back in the days. Now there's not so many of those around anymore, but plenty of shampoo bottles and other recycled plastics going into our products. 5 years ago, we started using closed loop plastics, so actually recovering plastics from used electronics and then reusing that, giving that a new life in new products in a certified process. We've also been using, and still are using, carbon fiber in what you can call an open loop process, because that is actually a waste product from the aerospace industry. So we're taking the waste from another industry and using that as a very strong and lightweight material in our laptops, which also has the advantage that it gives a nice design touch as well, because it kind of have a textile texture. Then we've been using plastic from windshields in our backpacks. We started a couple of years ago also with the closed loop recycling program to take rare earth magnets from IT infrastructure hard drives like servers and storage, and reuse that in hard drives for laptops. So starting to reduce our dependency on rare earth minerals and materials. And you might also have heard about our work to use ocean-bound plastics in packaging trays. So those are some of the examples, and there's actually more, but let's stick to these. And diving into the closed loop plastics example for one moment on the next slide, please. So that really came out as a bright idea, since we have the take back programs, and at the same time we're using obviously lots of plastics and materials in our products. So so a colleague said, hey, why don't we try and connect the dots here, to take that plastics from our take back program in the US as well. We started this working with our partner Wistron, one of the big IT manufacturers in Asia. They set up the Wistron Green Tech in the US together with Dell Technologies to have that process of recovering the plastics, then shipping it back to Asia, where it's being reprocessed and now reused in more than 125 different product models that ship around the world. So today, roughly 1/3 of the recycled plastic in our computers or servers is made from the closed loop plastics. And this actually also comes with a benefit for the environment and for the bottom line as well. TrueCost did a natural capital benefit calculation that showed that though this plastic is shipped around the world, it actually has an 11% smaller carbon footprint than virgin materials, than virgin plastics. And even though the oil price is going up and down, we still have a cost saving of around $2 million. That's not a huge cost saving, but that's enough to say this is fine. We can keep scaling this and bring it forward. So that's one example. Another example, as I mentioned, is our ocean-bound plastics on the next slide that we started 3 years ago. Again, seeing how could we turn a waste problem into an innovative packaging solution and material, and really using our core business, our use of packaging materials to drive an engine and create an incentive to collect that plastics and get it back into the economic system. And obviously, ideally, we wouldn't have to have anybody go to the beach and collect plastics. It should come straight from a recycling station. But we're trying to build that market demand, and currently using it in packaging trays for our laptops, and investigating further use also in products once we get the technology and the quality of the material right for that. We also realized, however, that though we are one of the largest IT companies in the world, shipping 200,000 products per day, not necessarily 200,000 laptops, but shipping a lot of products, we can't solve this huge plastic challenge alone. So if you move to the next slide, we actually started the Next Wave partnership together with the NGO Lonely Whale Foundation that we had been working with already in our own programs, and with 7 other companies, including General Motors and Trek Bicycle, Interface Carpets, and were later joined by IKEA and even our competitor HP, because this is too important to be keeping your cards too closed. So these companies have committed on a 5-year journey to reduce the use of plastics first and foremost, and then to scale and to drive the innovative uses of ocean-bound plastics in packaging and in products. So this is really an innovation partnership with the ambition to scale up the impact so we can create a truly large-scale, commercially viable process for collecting, processing, and bringing back ocean-bound plastic into the economic system. Good. Getting towards the end of life here on the next slide. So the final, what do we do with products at end of life, or actually we should say end of use first? And we have programs for our business or government customers, public customers around the world, as well as consumers, to help them either extend the life of their equipment with the refurbishing and reselling and getting the equipment the value back that we offer in our take-back services, or for consumers to easily go and order a return box so that they can send in send in their used equipment, get a voucher to buy new stuff as well as an incentive. So we're offering these services. We cannot force our customers to use our services. There is other services out there, of course. The important thing is to use a responsible recycling scheme. What we are seeing in our IT or PC as a service business models, however, is because, of course, we own the equipment. So we have a 99.9% take back rate there, where the vast majority of that equipment is being refurbished and then resold for a second life. So those are examples of what we're doing so far. And yes, please go to the next slide, because this is all the bases. And it's been a journey over 10 years. And now in November, we launched our destination for the next 10 years with our 2030 Moonshot goals across 4 pillars. But on sustainability, we're really aiming to accelerate the circular economy. So by 2030, we set ourselves the goal that for every product a customer buys, we will reuse or recycle an equivalent product. And in terms of our packaging materials, 100% of those will be made from recycled or renewable materials. And in our products, more than half of the product content will be made from recycled or renewable materials. So this is some really bold and ambitious steps from our side to get to what it takes to accelerate circular economy on a one-to-one scale in terms of our business model and our products and solutions. So with that, I think my time is up. Thank you. I hope you followed the whole way, and looking forward to hear next from Patagonia as well.
Louise, thank you very much. And I think it would also be right that I shout out to Stephen McGowan, who is one of our council directors who helped secure your input today. So if any colleagues here want an immediate kind of read across for Glasgow, Stephen, I'm sure could help you, because you'll be inundated, Louise. Not only did you give us, that deep overview, you took us actually to the Oceanbound initiative, and also, that Lonely Whale initiative. But actually, Dell has the kind of ambition that Glasgow has. It's got that moonshot ambition. I know equally, we've got another fantastic contribution coming from Ryan Gellert, the general manager from EA Patagonia, and I don't want to go into too much detail, Ryan, but you have obviously been hugely involved in your time at Patagonia in terms of the next successful initiative, such, if it's broke, fix it, and also the Warnwell program, and also maybe your experience from your 15 years in Black Diamond Asia as well. So, Ryan, over to you for again another global perspective on singularity. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here, and thank you, Louise. That was a great presentation, very inspiring. I will tell you that I'm talking to you all through a Dell computer right now, so I trust that you can see and hear me well. You're really honored to be here, and I'll just say that I'll try to keep this very brief and talk about our circular initiatives, which fall under an umbrella term that we call Warnware. But before I do that, just because I don't assume that everybody is familiar with Patagonia, maybe I just give one quick minute on some background on who we are. We're nearly 50 years old. Remain a privately held company, still owned 100% by the founder that started the company 47 years ago. He got his start into business by teaching himself to blacksmith and hand forging pitons for himself, his friends, and a small community to climb steep rock faces around the world. Started importing apparel for climbers, actually originally from the UK, and that was the origins of Patagonia. And over our 47-year history, despite our best efforts, we've become a pretty sizable global business. Again, privately held, but last year well north of $1 billion in revenue with operations around the world. We've tackled some of the most complex challenges in our supply chain over that time and given away well over $100 million to small grassroots organizations working to protect clean air, clean water, clean soil, and to also protect wild places around the world. And about a year and a half ago, we changed our mission statement, which the prior one was a little bit voluminous, served us pretty well for the prior 27 years, to a new one, which is we're in business to save our home planet. And so I mention all that because with our private ownership, with our history, and with a mission statement that is fairly focused on environmental topics, we're a little bit of a unique company. And so the circular initiatives that we're engaged with kind of fit within that. OneWare for us is 4 R's, and I think we've heard references to each of them in Peter and Louise's comments. But for us, they're number 1, reduce. We are very committed to encouraging our customers and really facilitating a dialogue with them about not buying things that they don't need. And if they do choose to buy something, buy things of quality, whether that's from Patagonia or from elsewhere. So really trying to transition this narrative, particularly in the apparel space, where I think with the advent of fast fashion, we've really gotten into the wrong place, from teaching people to be consumers of apparel to teaching people to be owners of apparel. So that's the first piece, reduce. The second piece is repair. That's been a foundational element of our approach to this relationship between our customers and us since the early days of Patagonia. We run North America's largest outdoor apparel repair facility, where we do well over 50,000 product repairs a year. And we've got similar apparel repair facilities around the world. We work with quite a few across Europe, here in Japan and elsewhere. We also do product repair in retail, and we've got vehicles that we put on the road in different parts of the world that go to events and do free product repair, not just a Patagonia product, but for many of our competitors. And you know, the idea there is really to socialize the value of treating things like they have value and not are just single use or limited use product. So that's also a foundational piece. In these COVID times when people are at home, one of the things that we have really accelerated is teaching people how to do product repair themselves. So a lot of the content that we've been sharing on social media and elsewhere has been very much targeted around that ambition. The third piece is reuse. We take back any product that somebody has from Patagonia where it has still got usable life, but they are done using it. If it needs to be repaired, we will do the repair. We will launder it, and then we will give them a credit for that product that they can use to buy something else, and we will resell that product. So you can send it to us in the mail, you can bring it to one of our retail stores, and we'll take that product back. And finally, number 4, very intentionally at the end of this cycle, is recycle. And we will take back any product that we have ever made, and we will recycle it using the best existing technology. We also, via our internal venture capital fund, make investments to increase the technical capacities for apparel recycling. So that's a topic that we put a lot of energy behind. And then, you know, somewhat tangential to all of that, which I think you would expect in the apparel sector, is the use of recycled materials. And, you know, a little bit similar to the packaging initiative that Louise mentioned, we have, through our internal venture capital fund, we've made an investment, actually a couple of rounds of investment, in a small startup that's become a little bit more established. Initially, 3 young Americans living in Chile who focused on diverting fishing nets from, at the end of life, they were often left at sea. They created collection points. They started turning those into skateboards. Skateboards are, you know, nice little product as a starting place, not necessarily a product of great use that's solving a major problem. Those became frames for sunglasses, and now we have perfected the ability to take that nylon material back to white, remove the scent, and turn it into fibers and apparel. And so that's an initiative that we'll continue to build. But I think the whole set of ideas under OneWare, again, don't buy things that you don't need. The most sustainable jacket is one that already exists. If a product is in need of repair, repair it, don't get rid of it. If you are finished with that product, but it's still got usable life, bring it to us and we'll ensure that it stays if we find another owner for it. And then finally, when it's truly at the end of its life, let us help you recycle it by sending it back to us. So that's kind of our point of view on our circularity initiatives here at Patagonia.
Excellent, Ryan. You've certainly displayed circularity there, between consuming to owning to reuse to recycle. So it's a fantastic insight. And thank you for keeping that focus like that there. I want to, before we go to questions and give you a chance the next 2 or 3 minutes to prepare your questions on chat, to go to Wesley Spindler. I think Peter's left us, Wesley, at stage. You're his business strategy and sustainability senior manager in that. You're also the co-author of this handbook. He just didn't write it himself. So, and I know that you've done some fantastic work as director of the World Economic Forum program director in this area, which we're obviously keen to do further work with you on that. But first of all, did he miss anything, or what's the key bit of the handbook that he should have said? Over to you.
Great question, and he did a great job, obviously covering the fundamentals. I guess the other element that we really bring out in the handbook that Peter didn't have time to mention is two important things. I think one is really the foundations are, as Peter said, are so core to how you get started and how you start structuring what circularity means to you. But following that, what we get into in the book and how we do a lot of our work in this space is we look at the role of different industries, and we break down what some of those specific challenges and opportunities are across different value chains, as well as some of the steps that need to be taken to really embrace circularity at the industry level. And importantly, I think what we do that's quite unique in the market, and to really highlight Peter's point, we see circularity as an environmental good, of course, but also a key for business competitiveness and business success is we look at a few value cases in those industries. So actually bring it to life with numbers of how you can actually capture that by undertaking 3 or 4 different initiatives. So I think that's one really key piece is thinking about the industry and the role that your particular you and your peers have in the circular transition, and where you can really make the biggest gains against certain waste pools or certain opportunities. And then I think the final piece, which we see, and I've really seen over the last couple of years as accelerating, is if we want to move away from more bespoke or siloed initiatives in organizations and get to the scale that we see with Patagonia and Dell, for example, organizations really need to start thinking about what it means for their own business and the how-to of the circular economy. So we break that down in our book into 4 dimensions. So looking across what you do for circularity within your operations. So things like water, waste, energy, and carbon. And we have kind of the journey for that. You also need to look at your product portfolios. Again, Dell and Patagonia here gave some great examples of how they're really rethinking everything from design to how products are used to how the end of use process works. And then finally, it's about embedding circularity into culture, really an important piece, and your organizational construct, as well as looking, as everyone so far mentioned, looking at your ecosystem and how do you engage in new ways with your customers, your suppliers, policymakers, investors, and so on. So a lot more that can be said there, but I think that getting even more granular is really important when you start to plan your circular journey.